Welcome, everybody, to Web and Beyond Live for February 8th, 2021. I'm Ray Sidney Smith, and I am president of W3 Consulting and managing director of W3C Web Services. And Web Services provides affordable web and WordPress hosting, domain name registration, and other web-related services for small business. And we've got some big announcements this week related to that. But first, Web and Beyond Live, which is my chance for me to discuss with you topical and timely issues relating to digital marketing for small business. Really, all the things I believe you as a small business owner need to know to be successful marketing and managing your web presence really on the web and beyond today, really marketing and managing on the web and beyond today. And so welcome everybody to Web and Beyond Live. If you're watching the replay, you can feel free to leave questions in the comments, but if you're here with me live right now, feel free to ask your questions in the comments, say hello, and I'll be happy to engage with you while we make our way through today. Today, what I wanted to do is cover a couple of interesting pieces of news bits relating to Clubhouse, which we've been covering the last few weeks, talking about the economic recovery and how it's impacting different industries, specifically here in the retail clothing space. I wanted to just touch a bit on that. Can't not talk about the Super Bowl ads, and so I may just touch on one that relates to digital marketing. And then I wanted to close out today talking about really 5 digital marketing trends that I believe I'm pronouncing his name right here, Sahir Shodin. He wrote about on business2community.com. He wrote this 5 digital marketing trends to watch out for in 2021. And I want to just go over the 5 of them here with you because I think it's always useful to kind of gut check the importance of some of these items when people tell you that you have to, follow these trends and do these things. Let's see if these things are really going to be useful for you. And I wanted to go over those with you. So with that, let me go ahead and bring up the first item. And let's see, share screen. And now you should be able to see that, of course, with Clubhouse, we have been talking about Clubhouse. Clubhouse is a social audio network, and so an audio social network, if you want to call it that. And it allows you to go ahead and access these rooms that are audio only. They're not recorded. You can have 1 to several people speaking at any given time, but not everybody all at once. And the idea here is that the kind of the what do you call it, the word's escaping me, but the high level, the elite, investors across U.S. and around the world have been utilizing Clubhouse in this way. It's the Andreessen Horowitz, the big investment firm. They're heavily invested in Clubhouse, so they've gotten all of their partner companies to come onto Clubhouse. So it's gotten quite a bit of notoriety. And as I said before, I don't particularly think that this is something that anyone needs to jump on the bandwagon with. It's currently iOS only, invite only, and beta, and they are working on an Android version, but that's kind of where it is right now. So as I probably figured would happen. Maybe you didn't know this, but Clubhouse was actually fairly popular, and it started with some folks in Hong Kong or in China proper. And they had been using it because China had not yet censored the Clubhouse platform, so you were able to use it on Clubhouse and have conversations that maybe you wouldn't be able to have online in other social networks because they were blocked or censored in some way, shape, or form. And of course, here we are now today, and China has gone ahead and censored the platform, and we'll see what's going to happen there. But the reality is that the Chinese people are now locked down from not being able to access the system now. It was hosted on AWS, Amazon Web Services, and so they figured out a way to be able to block it, known as the Great Chinese Firewall, the Great Firewall, and so we'll see what happens. I'm curious what will happen when Twitter brings Twitter Spaces to their platform. Will China attempt to block that component within the application as well? Who knows? But just goes to show that free speech is certainly under attack globally, and we need to continue to keep concerned about that. Certainly as small business owners, because if we're trying to get in front of an international market, this is obviously hampering our ability to go ahead and do that. But I just wanted to bring up the point that this is not without political implications. These social networks are now in the crosshairs of many regulatory bodies worldwide, and we're going to continue to see this kind of unfortunate melee of should we be using these social networks and should we be marketing on these social networks. From my perspective, stick to the mainstay social networks that you know and can trust will be around for a while. And certainly something like Clubhouse, yeah, it's great if we're here in the United States and you want to be able to jump into some chats with some other folks and learn from them and engage. It's real-time, one-to-one ratio. So you have to spend exact amounts of time. It's not like you can listen to the recording in accelerated speed or listen to portions of the audio in order to figure out what the right portion was to listen to. It's all real time. So you have to spend that one-to-one ratio of time to it. So you really don't have that productivity gain there. But there are some really interesting things happening on Clubhouse, and so I'm not discounting it. I think it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but it's just not for me where I'm going to set up house for my content marketing hub, because it's ephemeral. It's not really going to last for very long, and so we'll see where Clubhouse goes in terms of a platform on an ongoing basis. It may be like Snapchat, where this kind of ephemeral content is very appealing to an audience and they'll want to go there for that conversation, and that's the slice of their world that they'll use it for in that sense. Next up is the ongoing conversation around what's happening with the economic recovery. Right now, we're dealing with multiple variants of the coronavirus, and so COVID-19's pandemic is still raging on. It's still really a challenge for us all, and we're going to continue to have varying levels of lockdowns. Right now, the variant seems to probably multiple variants in the United States, at least, those seem to be on the uptick in terms of different parts of the country, and we have different political views on how to deal with this, and so we're just kind of in that space where we're still dealing with a lot of economic uncertainty, and we need to kind of come together and figure out a process for being able to come out of this. I'm excited to see that vaccinations are ramping up. I'm excited to see that people are aware now, from at least the leadership from the top down, that wearing a mask and doing physical distancing is the way in which we can protect people outside of vaccinations. Vaccinations are important, and we're looking forward to more people doing that. At least I am. And the ongoing goal is for us to be able to figure that out. But in relation to all of this, we're trying to figure out what is the economic impact of the shutdowns and the closures and the different movements of people around the world, since the same global travel is not happening, since certain countries are restricted from entering or leaving other countries. How is that all working out? Well, it turns out that Target notes that they hit $1 billion in sales regarding their activewear brands. And of course, that brought a whole bunch of excitement to a lot of people. But on the flip side of that, I then noted an article from Reuters that talked about the fact that clothing retailers were cutting orders with factories, and so those factories overseas are, of course, now starting to suffer as because of that. So we see this again, this unevenness about the economic both inequalities of this pandemic, but also the levers that are kind of pulling and pushing as it relates to it. And so what happens ultimately is that these kinds of, if we've basically kicked the can down the road in terms of the economic fallout, and you could bet that these kinds of fallouts, where garment factories in Bangladesh, if they're going to close down and shut down and have problems, that's going to create a downstream effect for us all that will eventually come back to haunt us. And so here we are with clothing retailers like Target and others that are really doing well with regard to activewear. But if these other folks who are actually producing the materials and manufacturing it and getting it to us, they struggle somewhere down the road, that means there's going to be a problem in satisfying orders and being able to do the things that we're used to being able to do. Like, for example, I take advantage of just-in-time printing all the time. And so these kinds of businesses that allow us to be able to produce merchandise very quickly on this kind of apparel, in these factories, if they all of a sudden dry up or disappear, that means customers who are ordering now become frustrated. which means you lose business, which then ultimately means that those people go elsewhere or figure out other solutions or just don't buy. And that's a real struggle that I think we should all be taking to heart right now and figuring out for the future. We can't just think, oh, well, sure, a couple of factories overseas are going to shut down, but ultimately, that doesn't impact me. I really believe that there are some of you out there who are taking advantage of this technology, and that technology is being the labor is being done by humans all over the world and in the United States as well, and they're going to be impacted. And when they are impacted, that's ultimately going to hurt you in some other way, shape, or form. And so we should just be mindful of that in that sense. So I just wanted to kind of point out that fact because I think it's lost on many people that somehow we're disconnected and buffered from those pieces when in reality we aren't. So next up, I wanted to just move us right along to this article, which talks about the Super Bowl ad that Reddit put out there. And the funny part is that maybe you don't know what Reddit is, and many people actually didn't know what Reddit is when this Super Bowl ad flashed up for everybody. And so Reddit is a social network, and it provides a platform for people to be able to share around particular interests. So just like any other social network. The thing that's really interesting about Redditors, or the people who use Reddit users are called Redditors. Redditors are like little mini editors of the sections, what they called subreddits. And so these subreddits, these channels within Reddit, are dedicated to topics, and they can become very granular topics. And so you can have a topic around something like social media, and then you can have subtopics within that particular item. So you can have, subreddits within subreddits, and you have all of these various channels where people are having these dialogues. Now, it tends to me, and I don't know if this is just me, but I note that on Reddit, Redditors tend to be fairly skeptical people, and they tend to be fairly I don't know if it's negative. I wouldn't say that it's a negative sense of it, but people definitely bring their criticism to Reddit on occasion. When I'm reading, generally I see a lot more criticism than I do see positive, productive conversation. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it bad, and it may also be just the various areas that I spend my time on Reddit. My time is spent in the technology space in there, so there may be places that are on Reddit talking about knitting and about all kinds of other, fun, interesting, social things where the conversation is very different, and so therefore I'm just not seeing that stuff. But either way, Reddit is there, and it brings notoriety to it by virtue of this Super Bowl ad. And so I just wanted everyone to be aware that Reddit is not just about this whole GameStop stock stuff that's happening with Robinhood and other consumer retail trading applications. Reddit is an entire social platform that can drive a lot of traffic to your website if you engage on the platform, but you have to just choose the right subreddits and share and engage in the platform in the right ways, which is genuinely wanting to contribute to the conversation, what I call listening, right? Engaging in the conversation and looking for areas where you can listening, reading and consuming, and then understanding what areas can you engage in, and then at the right time you can share links to your content to get people off of Reddit and to your website, blog, podcast, or otherwise. But you have to really spend and commit an investment of time so that people know that you are committed to that community, so that they don't just think that you're spamming them with links to your stuff. So Reddit's out there, and now it's probably a little bit more popular because of the GameStop stock volatility, issues, but also because they put out this Super Bowl ad, and so it was good to see a little bit of social marketing, social networking, kind of nod to them through this ad. Okay, next up, I just wanted to spend just a moment letting you all know about Google's changes. Google has been going through the process of, in essence, creating a new cookieless tracking system. And this is for a whole bunch of reasons. But in essence, the browsers, the major web browsers that are out there, the major platforms that are out there, and the companies that are trying to work within them. So, for example, Apple and Android, Apple iOS, iPadOS, and Android, underneath Google's leadership, the Android open source operating system has been really working toward getting rid of the cookie in essence. It's sometimes a persistent, can have different lengths of time, but a cookie is basically a file that lives on your system in what should be temporarily to be able to identify you so that you can stay in what we call a persistent state. But in essence, say, for example, you want to stay logged into a website. You can stay logged in because of that cookie, that little file that downloads in the browser session to tell them that you're still logged in. Well, of course, this has been used in marketing for years to be able to create a persistent state for tracking people. Well, it's just come to a head, and now a lot of privacy advocates and other folks are trying to fix all of this so that we no longer use cookies for that purpose. Well, here we are with Google finally coming out with its kind of next iteration of what that really looks like in terms of moving away from cookies. Apple has basically noted that applications like Facebook's Pixel program, which installs that little pixel and tracks people through the pixel, they're going to make people, in essence, give permission every time the Facebook Pixel launches or loads. That's going to be a huge annoyance to people, and so of course that's going to mitigate Facebook's ability to use the Facebook Pixel on their systems. And you might not know this, but Facebook Pixels are near ubiquitous across the advertising space. And so with all of this happening, Google is looking for these options, and here they are looking at Flock, which is their new federated learning of cohorts application. It's an extension they're using some machine learning. So we're going to see more and more of this. Just be mindful of the fact that the days of the cookies are near their end. Their end is nigh, as they say. So just be mindful that consumers are going to become more privacy conscious and have been becoming more privacy conscious over time. And there's a little bit of probably both cynicism and skepticism relating to big tech and their collection and use of our data. And so we need to just be mindful of that. And so as the way of Google goes, we should follow. It's important that Google is making these privacy-focused marketing choices. And as we look at those, we also want to collect and understand our consumers better. There's nothing wrong with us wanting to understand our consumers so that we can provide them with the right messaging to bring them closer to us, bring awareness to us, and closer to selling to them, but at the same time protecting their privacy. And so getting that permission-based marketing strategy in place so that people come to us and give us permission to be able to engage with them is going to be really important. So this all to say, you must get people's permission in order to market to them and utilize the tools that Google and other major advertising platforms are going out there and using today, even if it's using cookies, understanding the fact that those days are numbered, and you're going to need to start looking at other mechanisms and paying attention to things like Google Flock, which I'm going to be covering, over as long as it is developing, and whatever comes out of Facebook and so on and so forth, so that we can really pay attention to what the future of this looks like, and then adapt so that we can continue to do what we need to do in order to be successful as business owners. Okay, that brings me to my main kind of target topic of today. I wanted to really have this conversation around the idea of these 5 digital marketing trends that Sahir talks about here in this article on business to community. And so on B2C, he talks about 5 different items. So 1 was marketing automation, 2 is SMS marketing, 3 is user-generated content, 4 is revamped SEO because of Google's page experience, the Web Vitals, core Web Vitals page experience updates, and then 5 was social e-commerce, or social commerce as I like to call it. Now, the 5 digital marketing trends to watch out for in 2021 is the name of the article, and I'll say this, that these are things that I've been talking about for the past 5 years, so they're not particularly new to me, but they are still considered trends because they continue to make their way upward. For example, I've been talking about marketing automation and the use of SMS since 2000, I think 2000, maybe 12 is when I was in essence really, really bullish about the idea of SMS marketing, and still to this day I am. And the reason I am is because people are not utilizing the technology. So let's just go through these and look at all of this. So marketing automation. Marketing automation is just the idea of taking the tools you're using, integrating them, and then allowing those tools to be able to do work for you. Now, this is not necessarily a digital marketing trend as much as it is just a productivity trend, and in business, we want greater productivity, and the technology can do it now. And so with many tools that we can use to integrate with each other, we can really make that happen. And I'm actually looking to see how I can put together maybe some educational trainings and other things for small business owners around this area of automation, because it doesn't just limit itself to marketing, but can be really utilized here. So I'll give a really great example, which is in the email marketing space. We can have all kinds of really interesting things done when that happens. So I run Web and Beyond Community, and one of the things I want to be able to do is every time someone joins Web and Beyond Community, they go ahead and get a series of emails that engage them in the process of getting up and running, getting started in utilizing the community well. And so what marketing automation technology can do that directly in the email marketing software. We can have people join the email newsletter as soon as the email list as soon as they join the community, and then they will get a sequence of emails that help them understand how to take best advantage of the platform that is the community. And so that's the kind of marketing automation that both levels up, it does things that you are not currently doing, and helps you increase the quality of what you're communicating with your customers. At the same time, it can supplant the things that you are doing that you should probably leave to software or delegate to another person, but you don't need to delegate it to another person if the technology can do it. And these are things like, say you want to be able to send a receipt to every customer who makes a purchase, but your current software doesn't do that, and it requires you to do several steps in order to make that happen. This is where automation software can really go a long way. You can potentially have your accounting software connect to other tools so that when a customer does X, they get Y. And you can then say, okay, when a customer comes to my system and makes a payment, that triggers, say, a message to a virtual assistant. And then that virtual assistant's job is to go into the accounting software, download the PDF, and then open up an email and send them a thank you note with a template that you've created. So you can pair this up with manual operations also. So the automation is triggering a manual operation, and that trigger could be to you. So if you don't have an EA, virtual assistant, or an executive assistant, you can have it email you and just say, hey, by the way, so-and-so just made a purchase. Now's the time to sit down and just take the 2 minutes and execute an email thanking them and sending them the receipt. That's something that now increases the quality of your work and the consistency of your work just by automating the reminder to you, the trigger for you to do that work. So you have lots of opportunities here in the marketing automation space. I have for a long time used automation in social media to be able to syndicate articles that we're publishing on the blog to the various other social networks as a mechanism for just syndication. And the sky's the limit. So yes, marketing automation is certainly a digital marketing trend, but I want you to look at that really cohesively, look at that comprehensively across your entire organization, and look at how you can use that not just in marketing, but across the entire company. Next up is SMS marketing. As I noted before, SMS has a huge open rate. I mean, the open rate in your messages apps. So if you receive in Apple Messages or in Android Messages or Google Messages, the open rate is astronomically high. It's up in the 90s. And so when you get a text message, you typically open it. And this period. It's as simple as that. And because of that, you going ahead and executing SMS marketing strategies really is important. And the real reality there is that you need to use appropriate technology, right? You just can't start texting people with marketing messages. So that really does need a tool. EasyTexting.com is one platform that I've used with clients, but there are many other SMS focused and MMS focused text messaging platforms for being able to do that kind of marketing, making sure people can unsubscribe and subscribe again if they need to messages and all of that stuff. So yes, I think it's a trend. It's an old trend. I don't particularly think that that it ever stopped working. It's just that nobody really pays attention to SMS, and it's really, really powerful. It's not just for transactional stuff like, oh, by the way, you have an upcoming appointment with us. It can be for real lead generation opportunities and outbound marketing opportunities. You just need to use it correctly. Okay, user-generated content, also a good function. I don't really know if that's a digital trend. Like the reality is that if you're not using user-generated content, that is content that is created by the audience that you're serving, most of the time that is comments on the content you're creating, but it can also be, photos of your customers taking pictures of themselves with your product or using your product or giving testimonials or those kinds of things. Those are all really popular forms of user-generated content, and this particular author is talking about the use of a platform like TikTok, which allows the sharing and resharing of other people's content. That really falls into social media curation in my perspective, not user-generated content, in the sense that what I really care about is content that creates greater value for the audience that I'm serving, and it helps to elevate my brand in the process of that content. So if someone comments on my content, that makes my content more valuable and it's related to my brand. But in the case of like TikTok, people are really just propagating topical conversations that are being made, greater use of. So, people singing together and those kinds of things, or having a conversation and that extending that conversation. If that conversation doesn't really start or generate from my brand, then the value of it is not necessarily as high, if you can think about it that way. So from my perspective, I think UGC is great. I think it's really important to keep in mind. It works for many businesses, but it's not necessarily the end all be all. If you're producing great content and going out there and doing effective listening, that is going out there and looking for conversations to engage in, UGC is one way in which you can generate content if you can't scale your own. But there are just really good ways to scale your own before you go out and do a UGC campaign. Okay, we've talked about this earlier, which is that Google has upcoming changes to the way in which they show content, and this is going to be obviously very important to all of us. But the biggest thing is that the core web vitals that we talked about in I forget which episode it was, but if you go back in the feed, you can see the Google Core Web Vitals update. You should really be paying attention to that. Otherwise, these new Google updates that this particular person is talking about are things that are not necessarily of any real consequence to business owners. If they are writing great content, if they are recording great content in audio or video, and they are doing all the right SEO functions here, then the idea of Google making some update here or there is not really going to impact the smaller sites. If you have thousands or tens of thousands of pages on your website, then yes, you're going to need to pay attention to Google's changes. But the SERPs page changes are not as important as they are to the Google Core Web Vitals update. That page experience update is going to be more important to you and just being indexed in the first place by Google. So that's more important to me there. And then last but not least is social e-commerce. Now, once upon a time, I would have told you that the whole concept of social commerce was bunk, that you couldn't do it. And I was right then, and I think it's changed. The fundamental change now is that many of these platforms, Facebook and Instagram, specifically Pinterest, really started the game there, though. They started with the shoppable pins concept, where they are now caking into the system the e-commerce functionalities that give you the ability to actually make a purchase and have purchase intent directly on the social networks. People are now thinking about making purchases from and within social networks. That didn't really and wasn't really the case when we first got started. Now, from my perspective, do I feel like this is a good thing for you as a small business owner? Probably not. If you have a company like Target that is capable of spending, thousands and thousands of dollars per month on getting their products displayed within a social network that people can then purchase by clicking on an image and purchasing from there. They have the infrastructure for their mobile e-commerce applications that connect it up. All of that's great. And if you have a great social commerce platform that is integrated with your mobile commerce platform, also great. I recommend that. But for most small business owners that are, say, service-based or they are small batch product-based, this is not going to be particularly the make or break for you. The reality is that you should still be doing the right things, which are engaging people in value that get them to come to your e-commerce site and make a purchase, if that's what you're trying to do. But don't think that Facebook shops or Instagram shops, or even when Twitter eventually brings out their platform, that that's going to start bringing in a lot of business for you, because the reality is that you'll have a huge amount of competition from big box brands that are going to be getting in front of people, and they'll be spending the advertising dollars, the advertising budget to really bring first look at their stuff before they go ahead and spend money on you. So those are the 5 trends that he talked about. I think that they are all trends that have been happening for a long time, and they're not particularly, new to me. But I think it's good for us to be kind of aware that they exist, and so I appreciate the bringing those things to the fore for us. So those are my thoughts as we walked my way through the article, and hopefully that was useful and helpful for you to kind of trigger some new ideas and thoughts there as well. So we have reached the top of our time together. If you have any questions, feel free to leave those as comments on the show, and we will be back here next week. We're back to Mondays at 11 a.m. I really thought we would try different times throughout the week, but it actually ended up causing more hassle both in my calendar and in others' ability to attend. And so we're back on Mondays at 11 a.m. Eastern. And so if you've enjoyed this live stream, feel free to hit the thumbs up icon. That helps us make new small business friends. And so thank you for doing that. If you have a question, as I said, leave a comment. But if you also want to, you can tweet or message us on social media at W3 Consulting, W3 Consulting on Twitter, and we're on Facebook. I think we're W3 Consulting Inc. On LinkedIn, we're W3 Consulting, and so on and so forth. So thanks so much for spending this Web and Beyond live with me. I'm Ray Sidney Smith on behalf of W3 Consulting and our subsidiary W3C Web Services. Have a great week ahead marketing your small business on the web and beyond. Take care, everybody.